Valor Magazine sitting down with Tim Vetter. Hey, I appreciate you sitting down with us. It's just going to be a short conversation between the two of us. Get to know you a little bit better. We'll move on from there. Which branch of service did you join?
Joined the U.S. Navy. Joined in technically 95 delayed entry program. Still in high school, so I graduated in 96, so active started June of 96. I come from a military background as far as like my family, grandfathers and uncles. Kind of split down the middle, Marine Corps and Navy. I think like most young guys at the early on, kind of thinking more pie in the sky stuff. So I think I was more drawn towards the Marine Corps at first, but was lucky enough to have some people, in my life, my uncles and even some other friends that had, intimate knowledge of both services, right? And from different spectrums, from World War II, Vietnam, kind of some of the early stuff in the early 80s, Lebanon and stuff like that. So I got to kind of take my fantasy idea of what it was going to be, right? No real perspective, and then people's that loved me perspective, and kind of gave me an idea of what both were kind of be. Still kind of thought about the Marine Corps. Went and saw both recruiters, Marine Corps and Navy. I was still pretty close to going to the Marine Corps, but I think the last thing for me was a good friend of mine who was in Force Recon in the Marine Corps. He was kind of the deciding factor of the Navy. For whatever reason, it just his experience resonated with me, and he kind of said, listen, go in the Navy, you're going to see the world, go get a lot other things and other what you're thinking. If this is something that you want, you can find other aspects in the Navy, or you can always go back in the Marine Corps. So kind of a hard decision, but ultimately at the end I felt like I made the right one.
Tell me about boot camp. How exciting was that?
Super exciting. I think everybody that joins the military, you hear something, right? You got an older brother, a cousin, a father, uncle, somebody that went through it. And of course, it's the hardest thing, they ever went through, or at least that's what they tell you, right? Again, having some good perspective, I felt at that time, being a young guy, it's not gonna be anything I can't handle. So I think anxious. I think I was just ready in that part of my life to move on. Like I said, I already made that decision early on in high school to do that. So it really was like a countdown. So I was really excited. I knew it was going to be tough, but I didn't think it was going to be anything that I couldn't handle. So actually, it was great. Went there, super excited, happy to go. Do the whole go there, do the MEPS thing. Up all night. You fly out there. You meet some people on the way out there because everybody's going to boot camp at the same time. You kind of hit the ground running. Kind of lines you up. You made your first phone call. Tell mom and dad, everybody that you're safe. And they stick you in one big barracks, right? I'm like, this is kind of what I thought, right? Like kind of communal thing. Everybody would be together. Not that bad. It's pretty late. I think we went to bed 2, 3 in the morning. Probably like 4:30 in the morning. People come in screaming, right? Screaming, yelling. It's like, okay, I've dealt with that before too. And I was lucky enough or unlucky enough to go to Great Lakes, basically outside of Chicago. The Navy had Orlando and San Diego for boot camp. Somewhere around 96, they shut both of those down. So I'm outside now. It's 4:30 in the morning. I'm tired. It's raining now, so perfect, right? And I can still remember this. I was looking up at this tree. It's raining. It's dark. It's cold. They're yelling. And I was like, what did I just get into? And they went from there.
What was your MOS in the Navy?
So in the Navy, they were actually your rate, basically, like an MOS. Mine was Operations Specialist. So kind of a little background on that. I'm not sure how the other branches were, but basically when you got done with your ASVAB and everything else, they kind of said, here's what the Navy, based off your score, what you can do, right? I think I had signalman, cryptologist, and OS. So Operations Specialist, from the broad sense of looking at it, dealt with Combat Information Center, kind of the heart of the ship, dealt with air, surface, subsurface tracking, tactical data links, kind of like the heart center of the warship, if you will. So that really kind of, it's like, man, it seems like your hands are a little bit everything. Navigation, anti-submarine, anti-air, weapon systems. So I ended up kind of picking that one. That was what my actual MOS was Operations Specialist.
What ships were you on while you were in?
So again, this is either lucky or unlucky. I ended up 4 years active, and I was on 2 different ships and had 3 deployments, 2 Westpacks and a Unitas, a South American tour. My first ship was a Spruance-class destroyer, DD-976, USS Merrill. Great ship, it really was. And then I decommed that, pre-commed a new ship, an LHD-6, what we refer to as kind of like the Gator Navy, because really those ships are primarily for the Marine Corps, and the sailors are really just providing a service to operate the ship, but the ship is really a Marine Corps asset. And so two different, kind of destroyer Navy, surface Navy, warfare, and then Gator Navy, Marine Corps, kind of amphibious ship. And that was the LHD 6 Bonhomme Richard.
While you were in the Navy and on the ships, did you encounter any sort of stressful events or anything that sort of woke you up a little bit?
I think kind of like what we were talking about before early on is being so young and kind of wide-eyed and going into this whole thing. I think I was fairly good at telling myself, how I was supposed to act or what else. I had to be tough, right? Like it's kind of like the idea behind being a young American and especially patriotic and going into the service. You kind of have to play that machismo kind of attitude. So going through some things. Different parts of the Navy, things were relatively hard just for your learning as a first time probably being away from your parents, like me. And so you get some homesickness. You kind of go through having to, not necessarily live in the comfort that you want to live into. And then it kind of gets to a point where, okay, you start seeing these other stressors in your life that you never typically wouldn't have. I get to sleep in whenever I want. If I'm home, mom made all my food. And so I thought, okay, this was just the stresses I was going to have, right? These were the things I was going to, because the concept for me was it's a warship for sure. We trained to go to war, but there really wasn't a threat, right? We're talking about kind of the mid 90s, late 90s. So I guess as I was going through, I was like, I just never really thought about it a whole lot, right? It was just more of this is my job, this is what we do. And so I kind of put it out of my mind. And then this was by the time we actually got to the Bonhomme Richard. Doing workups, we had, I think it was the 15th MEU was on board with us, so we're doing all their workups and everything. 46 or 47, and they were doing practically landing on the back of like ships. And it happens a lot of times, unfortunately, but it happened at this time as well. And one of the back tires actually got caught in the net, tried to get out of it, didn't realize it, so it ends up, flopping over. And I think out of, I don't know, it was 20 some odd people, but 18 died. Most of them went down all the way to the bottom. But obviously we were the main command ship, so we got to receive all the bodies. And that was that culmination, right? It went from what I thought was stressors, what I thought I was kind of grown to be this hardened man, also the fake facade that I kind of gave myself of how I was supposed to act. And it was the first time I ever really kind of saw a dead body, right? Like and then not just one, then two, and then more, right? And then not really knowing how to act, kind of looking at that in the moment one. Probably really good about the military in general is you train for certain events, good or bad or whatever, and that training really kind of takes over. People are doing what they're supposed to do, medics, repair, fire, rescue, whatever. And so I think initially in that phase, I had that thought. I saw these dead bodies. I was kind of just reacting to what we were supposed to do in the moment. And then I really had to look at kind of other people, right? Some mentors, like in the Navy, we call them sea daddies, right? It's a mentor, right? And so that was another time, again, a growing moment in my life where I had to kind of look to somebody more senior to me and kind of say, okay, how am I supposed to act? And it came across as, this is real. You act any way you want, right? People kind of mourn in their own way or kind of deal with their own way, but this is the job, right? It is a dangerous job. You can look at it as, are we going to war tomorrow or combat? Or is this, am I working like a job that's like a construction site where this is a dangerous job, right? Things are moving, things are happening. And this is ultimately, the possibility. Somebody might have to sacrifice training or in war. And it really just kind of came together for me, right? I think it helped me, later on in life for sure, when other traumatic events came up. But that was my first real kind of more spectator because I wasn't involved in it per se. It was my ship. It was our crew. It was, it was guys that we talked to. We hung out with. We knew. But looking back on it, it was just that ball of emotions, and it was understanding that this is a tough job and it's serious, and take it serious at times for sure, and realize that might be the ultimate sacrifice, right? And it might not be glorious. That was the other thing, right? The misconception in my head that if you're in the military and then you're going to do a job in the military and eventually you'll probably die for your country, that was like this kind of perceived childish, patriotic duty. And then I kind of saw, I was like, well, shit, that wasn't fucking honoring that. So it was, a lot of confusing parts, but it was a young person, and I learned a lot from my mentors that helped me kind of go through that moment. Um, but unfortunately, it wasn't the last time either, and it's just, that was that poignant moment for me. I think as a young person in the military that kind of saw something traumatic for the first time, and was attached to it in some way.
So after you got out of the Navy, what did you get yourself into?
So at that time, like a good sailor, I was super young, super ambitious, married way too early, and so I had a wife at the time. Now I'm older now, so I can kind of speak of it more nostalgically. Never saw my wife for like the 3 years or so out of the 4 I was in the military. But I had a plan. Her dad owned a security company, had got accepted to school. So my idea was go home, go work for the in-laws, go to school. Seemed like a pretty solid plan. And I was happy to do it. I was on the fence at first. I was actually at a point, as I was leaving, thinking about really staying in. I thought that possibly it could be a career. Enjoyed it enough, didn't hate it so bad at some things, but that was the thing that kind of won out the day was go to school. That's what you're supposed to do. Get educated. We had the GI Bill, so that might be the greatest investment the military, the country ever did for anybody. That's a great social program that I think put a lot of people to school. So I did that. I went home, worked for my in-laws. They owned a security contract company. It was a dealership with ADT, so we did home and residential security systems installing. So I was going to be a technician installing. Perfect. Also go to school full time. So I took about 3 or 4 classes at first, and then I realized that with a full-time job, I averaged about 2 or 3 classes a semester, and so I hit the ground running. I think I got out in, like I said, the middle of June, and I was in school first time ever at UT Arlington that very end of August. So not a whole lot of time. By the time I moved from San Diego to Texas, got a place, reconnected with my wife, got set up for school. So it was a lot, right? It was a lot of logistical stuff, but I crammed it all in, hit the ground running. I thought that was the best thing. So yeah, by that August, within about a month or so, I was in school pretty much part-time and then full-time job.
After you got out of the Navy, you went back to school, and you were working for a contractor for ADT. Explain a little bit how your progression worked with your jobs in that time frame.
So like I was saying, no fault of probably anybody's other than just being young and keeping in tradition with the Navy standards. Got married way too young. Realized that working a full-time job, going to school, and wife having her own career at that time, she had finished school, working for my in-laws, it just probably wasn't going to work out. So ended up getting a divorce, which was a tough time. So I kind of transitioned out of obviously working for ADT and the security contracting, but learned a lot from there. Learned that obviously I could learn a new trade, a skill. Had to learn how to install and kind of deal with the programming behind that, some sales. And right around that time, my parents actually owned a tanning salon, believe it or not. Never thought in a million years that I'd be working at a tanning salon, nor did I want to or aspire to. But I think what most people kind of probably resonate with is life happens and you kind of got to go, right? Got out of a bad marriage. My mom actually got sick. She was managing it and kind of needed a next man up type thing. And I really thought that was just going to be a transition from getting out of that, a marriage, that job, helping my parents out, finishing school, because by that time I was, probably 3 years into school and getting on my 4th year. So I kind of saw the end of that. My idea was, I'll finish my degree. And of course, now that I have this degree, I will go do something with my life. I had no real plan other than I have a degree, I'll go do something. So I ended up managing my parents' tanning salon, which I learned a lot from. Learned a lot of small business, inventory, taxes, managing people, really managing expectations, which is a trait that's very valuable down in life. When you're doing kind of customer service stuff like that, I mean, you really learn quickly how hard and you're only gonna work. You're gonna work the hardest for a job that's basically like a family-owned job, right? Like a lot of people might think, oh, you had your own company, how great would that be? You don't, no real hours or anything like that. But nobody loves it as much as you, and that means you work every day, all the time. So I think that also reiterated back to I can put time in. I know I can work hard. I want to work hard for something that I have some ownership in. Learning just like the logistical administration and management, even though it was managing, at some time young girls in their 15s to women in their older 20s and everything in between. I thought I knew everything about women except for when I had to figure out how to manage them in a work environment. I don't mean that in a sexist way. I would hope that most women would probably, come to my aid in the fact that I don't know how two individuals that are best friends that work together the next day hate each other and can't work together. And so I only bring that up as that's just life, right? And so that's where I go back to that managerial skills, managing people's expectations, learning. I never thought in a million years that I would still, at almost 40 years old, look back on those days and see, man, like that really helped me. You have to, people just will, life happens. So I had to literally learn that. So that was that transition for school ending, life kind of changing from uh, being in the military, learning a kind of a civilian job, helping my parents out, learning small business, getting all that good. There's no way to do it. You have to get in there, work hard, put your time in. I wasn't at, even though it was my parents' company, and even though it was my in-laws' company, I was the lowest man at total pole. I did all the weekend shit. I did all the stuff that nobody else wanted. And listen, I wasn't altruistic. I wasn't trying to do that stuff like, oh yes, look at me. I'm getting my stripes. It was just, it was a part, I think, in most people's life that was a time that you're not in charge and you're earning your stripes. And looking back on it, it sucked, but man, I am very beneficial for all those little tiny shitty weekends, having to come in early, come back, stay late. And somewhere around '03 or so, end of '03, some of my military buddies started talking about contracting. Afghanistan kicked off, Iraq war's kicking off. So I started having those rumors in the back of my head. And it didn't really kind of become a realistic thing for me until around the beginning of 2005. Most of my friends have been over there now for a year or two, good money. So I started thinking about it. I was like, I don't really want to manage a tank salon. I got good at it in that tiny like microcosm, but then I started looking at the macro side. I was like, okay, what am I gonna do? I was like, man, I don't want to kind of get back into the military. I feel like at that time I had been out enough. I could look back at it nostalgically and like it, but I didn't know if I wanted to get back in something like it. But lo and behold, somewhere around that 2005, I started looking at going overseas to do military contracting.
All right, so let's talk about the time you spent doing military contracting. Was it synonymous with your military training? Was it some of the same things? Was it being in the Navy and doing military contracting? Was it similar, like the hierarchy and the way it was set up?
I ended up doing about 13 years of military contracting. So it really defined, I think, pretty much my entire adult life. And I've only had now, after the fact, to look back on it and kind of understand some of these things. I outflanked that entire system and not even knowing I was doing it. So kind of answer that. I had more of a technical background than a tactical background in the Navy. So I didn't get the whole broad understanding of what kind of military contracting was. I had a few friends that were doing like personal protection, and they were telling me, kind of the requirements. And kind of early on too, if you weren't like a group guy or a team guy or a CAD guy, they had a hard time early on like that. I had a lot of guys that were coming out of battalion and regiment, and I'm not talking about just Ranger School guys. I'm talking about guys that were in battalion, and they were having a problem. So I bring that to say, little old Tim, OS in the Navy. I was like, man, I can't do that, guys. I don't have that kind of background. So what I ended up finding out was, and most people that know contracting, there's a lot of other logistical skills and other things that they also need to help support. So my niche was the field security technician. So that was my kind of in. Mine was with DynCorp, 2005, and not really understanding what it was, but it was basically something that I felt like I could wrap my arms around. I had a fairly technical background. I didn't necessarily know exactly some of the equipment stuff, but put my bio in, got approved, and they said, we'll deploy you in a support role for the personal protection. These were Department of State contracts. And I was off and running. And again, it was just another one of those, 0 to 100. Yeah, I think about doing it. Maybe I should do it. I'll fill out the paperwork, and it went from wait to let's go to training, knock all that out, and deploy. And 2005, I landed in Kabul, Afghanistan, Christmas Day, and I hit the ground running as a field security technician for the embassy protection detail there in Kabul. What I didn't know was the company that I was working for, I could say that because they were DynCorp, lost the contract in 2 months. So my job as a field security technician was basically to manage all the military crypto radios that they had from the military, and support basically the teams that were providing security for the ambassadors. 2 months later, they lose the contract. Anybody that's in military contracting knows that's how it goes. Me being brand new, I was like, I flew all the way fuck over here. I'm in Afghanistan, and I don't have a job. Better lucky than good. That's pretty much probably the bow around my entire career. Um, got pulled over immediately because of that skill set. There was 110 guys on ground when DynCorp lost the contract. Um, Blackwater ended up taking over in March of 2005, and they only took 10 guys from the old contract, and I was one of them. So again, better lucky than good. So hit the ground running with them. Started doing the same thing, field security technician. I think pretty much from the military on, getting back in that camaraderie, it was pretty much heavy at that time with a lot of um, team guys. There were some Army Ranger guys there, some Special Forces guys, but there was a whole eclectic group. There was infantry, Marine guys, infantry, Army guys, um, cops. Cops got it hard too. They got it bad for early on, but they brought a very unique skill set as well, which we kind of all learned to pick from everybody's little. And you were right back in it again. It was kind of all the good parts of the military, with none of the bad. You got the camaraderie again. You got that kind of good, brotherly kind of competition and camaraderie, and it was just something that I was like fish to water. I was there. I was happy to be there. I was happy to be there in a supporting role, but immediately I was like, I want to do something else. I want to try something else, and didn't necessarily have the initial skill set at the beginning, but all I did at the early onset was became a sponge. If the teams were doing training, I went to go do training with them. If they were doing, defensive tactics, I went and did defensive tactics. If I could squeeze my way and go into the range, go shoot the belt fetch or something, I would go do that. And again, lucky enough to where there was plenty of people that wanted to have the ego and say, "Oh, no, you can't," But that's what they feed on, right? Like around, they know people like that. Those people are only satisfied with what they feel like they have over somebody else, and so you're going to run into those people, I think, whether that was military contracting or your corporate life or your family. And all I can say with that is they're helping you. They identify themselves early on as somebody that is just a piece of shit. They don't want to. They don't want to help somebody else. Gravitate to the people, and I did that. That were like, "Hey, man, looks like you're pretty interested. We're going to go do some more, defensive tactics. We're going to go do this." And I got lucky. Part of it was I was willing to put the time in, but the other part was those guys didn't have to do that. And it took about a year or so kind of doing stuff like that, still doing my normal job, and got lucky enough to finally build up that skill set to be able to go to a vetting course to do the actual physical security or the personal security stuff. And went to the vetting course, finished that, and then basically hit the reset button, came back to Afghanistan, doing a whole other thing. And pretty much the rest is kind of history from there. I went from FST to operations security specialist, working at the top, to your normal personal security specialist, doing everything from driving lead, follow, the limo, to being saw gunner, 240 gunner. Moved up to be shift leader, which is like a team lead. Ran those for years. Ended up doing about 8 full years in Afghanistan. Was happy enough that my last about 5 years or so plus was the team lead for the ambassador's protection detail. Still to this day, some of the greatest human beings on this planet. Still friends with them, still talk to them. When we all helped each other through all those times. Just an awesome experience. It really was. It was hard at times, but man, I wouldn't trade any of that in for the experience that I got. Got lucky enough with that same company, transferred to Israel, doing the same thing, running a team out there, and then became the detail leader in Afghanistan, or excuse me, in Israel, and then managed the whole actual protection detail there, and did that for about 4 years, and just recently wrapped that up in the last year.
So perfect segue from 13 years of doing military contracting work. What did that experience, along with your military experience, sort of lead you into what you're doing today?
So it's everything. Today I'm actually doing executive protection for a CEO in Dallas. It's a financial company. I actually work for the holding company, and the holding company owns about 4 or 5 other financial companies. So it's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're actually growing as well. And so what they understood was that they needed they needed to build out their security program, not from the lowest level of corporate security to the highest level of executive protection. And really, kind of how I got that was like I think how a lot of things kind of happen in the security small industry, trying to break into it. One, you have to have the resume. You just do. You can't fake the funk on that. You have to have the years of experience. You have to have the knowledge and the skill sets. But and a lot of stuff like that, it's word of mouth. It's who you know. When I first thought I was going to end contracting, I knew I was going to take a lot of time off. I kind of had in my head 6 months to a year. I was like, I just don't want to do anything. But after about a month or so, my body's used to moving. I was used to doing things. I started looking for, kind of I say actively, but really more passively. I started doing, I think, what was just the normal thing that people would think, right? Let me get on all the websites. Let me get my resume out. Let me do all those things, right? And I found out that then that was like a full-time job. Not a woe is me, like, oh, pat me on the back with how hard I was working. To kind of put that out there, keep up with it, and still be proactive, it was a lot. And I actually, very early on, I was like, dude, this fucking sucks. Because I wasn't also getting anything back, right? That was the other side. So what ended up happening here was I tried a bunch of different things. I tried doing classes on how to do my resume better, to how to present myself better, to any kind of corny thing you could think of to try to, and just nothing was really working. And this was through word of mouth. Somebody was looking through somebody, and the small community within the community. Somebody got my resume somewhere, and this was before I even got out of contracting, and just gave me a call, and we started having discussions. Ended up being about 5 different interviews, from the director of security kind of all the way up to the CEO. And but I think the big thing was that they're building their security out, and they saw all my years of experience from the kind of bottom guy on the ground all the way up to the top of the top administrator. And I think that really opened the door. And what made this interesting was, like, it wasn't just going to be personal protection. It was going to be a concept of how we can build out their corporate protection, their executive protection, and build that and grow. Yeah, my military and contracting time, I wouldn't be doing the job if I couldn't. If I didn't have all that basically hard skill sets, experience. But I think what adds to that too is somebody that could have maybe classically trained, right? Stayed here in the States, plenty of good EP classes to take, a lot of good trainers out there. You could require a lot of that. Maybe, dare I say, all of it, right? Because there's plenty of curriculum out there. I think the uniqueness of the military is, again, you can't fake the process, right? I think that's why even after all these years, we're talking, right? We're having conversations with other veterans, because at the end of the day, we all drive cars. We all go to we all go to our houses. We have shared experiences as human beings, but there's something about whether or not you were in the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Army, or whatever. There might be some poking fun, but you have that shared experience, and it's a very unique shared experience that I think will always kind of gravitate us when you hear somebody talk about the military. It's just your ears perk up, and you have that instant connection. And then the military contracting was just overseas. I couldn't keep up with a lot of guys here in the States that had multiple brick and mortar bachelor's or master's degree, and the very fine arts of crisis management and things of that nature. But what I could do is articulate in a way of what crisis management was in college and the actual administration of that, because that's important. It really is. But I could also speak to, I remember this time that I had to deal with a crisis management situation. I remember this time that I did this logistics things or these contractual obligations. Or I remember this time I, had to kick down a door and go inside and have that moment, right? Small unit tactics training, all that stuff in between wasn't just apply, wasn't just a theory based. It was actual applied application. And for me, that resonated. And that's not a tip better super awesome. I actually am very humbled by the fact that I get to do this and I've done this. And I actually look at, my mentors and other people that are still doing it and have the resumes like me, because I look to them as like, damn, like you guys are the cool ones. You guys are the ones that, helped me along to get some of the skill set. But that's one thing I really noticed, that when I started talking to these individuals that had this idea, maybe this preconceived notion of what the military was and contracting was, and even what they thought they needed, right? Like, oh, we need these certificates and we need these, and you do. I'm not taking away from that. There's multiple paths to get to the same thing, but that's, I think, what bounced off the page for my interviews and landing me this job right now was whoever they interviewed. It got very vanilla, when I could speak to and then actually say, oh yeah, not only have I done this particular thing that you need, and I can give you multiple examples in the real world of when I had to do that. And that's completely military and contracting. That's the only place I got that.
So, do you attribute any of your professional successes in your life to that basic core military training that you got in the Navy?
I don't. I think maybe more for me indirectly. I know that kind of sounds like a no. Basic seamanship, naval history, my specific MOS or rate or my job. Those things necessarily don't make that doesn't make me a great personal protection for the CEO. But those core fundamental work ethic, um, kind of self-sacrifice, and not self-sacrifice in the fact that again I'm this great human being that somehow can just lay my life down for somebody else. It's that learned experience, that shared experience, like we kind of talked about at the beginning, of that shared suck, and that doesn't have to be a foxhole. Unfortunately, a lot of times it is. That could be a desert, that could be a jungle, that could be a ship. It's just a unique shared experience that I think all of us veterans kind of have. That yeah, I can't not fall back on that. So that's why it's more of a yes in an indirect way. Nobody taught me in the Navy how to do personal protection. No, I didn't learn it in my military time how to do some of the hard skill sets of small unit tactics or shooting or some of these other things. Definitely not to the skill level that landed me like the job today. But the work ethic, the idea of the self-sacrifice is you aren't as important as the whole, right? Yeah, of course. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether or not you're just a stay-at-home mom or dad, whatever it is that you're going to do, if you can't have a foundation and something that's going to allow you to wake up and say, Tommy hates me, fucking Billy hates me, I'm not good looking like Tim, I can't, do all these other things. Well, you got to fall back on those people. Probably didn't either. And what else are you going to get from the military other than discipline? You're not going to be comfortable. In fact, just the opposite, right? Learn to be comfortable when other people are uncomfortable, and you will shine. You just will. Most people's default is, this is too hard, this is too early, it's too late. There's an excuse there. And that doesn't mean that everybody that joins the military is going to be this robotic, Schwarzenegger that will just, but you're going to fall back on it. I think that's a part of that shared experience we all have. And so, yes, where I'm at today, direct reflection uh, on my military time. The military contracting is just really an extension of that, and I think it comes from those core values that I think all branches have. Plus, not to take all the credit too, great mentors in the military. Um, a lot of douchebags too. I think plenty of people can, they're not all superheroes, but they all wear the uniform, right? They all made a conscious decision to say, this Thanksgiving, I'm not gonna be with my family. I might be in bumfuck shit. This place sucks. So hats off, dude. Like you did that. You know, you stood up and were accounted. You raised your hand and said, "Yeah, I'll do that for you. You know, I'll be there when you don't have to be." And so we also know that there are some really highly skilled um, individuals that take on a lot more than the average person, and those people should definitely be put on a higher pedestal. But in encompassing, kind of wrap that up for sure. I think where I'm at today is the foundation of the military, starting that, uh, the military contracting, the mentors that I had in the military, and honestly, just the shared ethos of whatever that whatever that all means. I could sit here and give you a kind of a definition of that, but it's just when I'm around people that I know and love, and that I know truly love and care for me. Um, Majority of the people in that room are going to be prior military. Unique to me. That doesn't mean that there's not great humans and great individuals that have other shared experiences that aren't in the military. But man, just I can't escape it. I have this long lineage, and I can directly point back to it all started Great Lakes, June 6th, 1996. Shit's raining cold. What the fuck am I doing? And 40-year-old Tim is saying, "Yeah, that's what you're doing, bro. You're starting, you're starting that first step." And yeah, and it's got me to this point. So always going to be more nostalgic looking back. I think you filter out some of the I hate this. I'd never want to do this again. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't change it. And so it's definitely allowed me to get to this point.
So, what advice do you have for military personnel who are transitioning out of the military?
For anybody getting out, obviously look at whatever skill set you had in the military, see if it does translate to some sort of civilian job. If you have that, then you're better off, right? Like make that work. Why not transition into that? For the people that are coming out that necessarily don't have a direct correlation or like a lateral movement, you know, infantry guy coming out of the Army or Marine Corps or something, we don't have a civilian infantry. Tougher. That being said, everybody from that lateral movement from technical to something civilian, or I don't have something that I was in the military, I would say that you have skill sets that people want in the corporate world. You have you have been part of something that's been pretty special. I think a lot of veterans in general too tend to be a little too humble. It's a good thing. That's why I think we all still stay around each other, and it's part of being that kind of silent professional. That doesn't translate that well in the civilian world, especially if you're new to it. You're trying to go into interviews. You need to be the biggest supporter of you. Now, there's a fine line with that, right? It's not cocky and arrogant. It's confident and sure of what worth you have. And nobody knows that, and nobody's going to translate that as well than you. Um, I think first, all the little skills you can learn, resume writing, interviewing, prep. I mean, all those little things are going to help. Um, but that's going to be the biggest thing I think is start understanding how you can basically sell yourself and sell yourself of if you don't have if there's not like a hard like listen, you have to have this cert, right? If you don't have the cert, you can't apply. Well, that's easy, right? Go get the cert. But if it's we're kind of roughly looking for this kind of experience, it's kind of broad or vague, and you're kind of sitting around, it's like, wow, these people have bachelor's degrees, they don't really need it, but they're going to use that experience, and maybe they got 1 or 2 years. Well, you need to start realizing how you can translate. When you were a team leader, when you were a squad leader, when you were in charge of X, Y, or Z, or handled multi-million-dollar equipment, or you were responsible or part of, and you need to try to articulate and break down your military duties and responsibilities that will translate into the civilian world. Maybe not the equipment you worked on, maybe not the exact particular job you did, but people want people that they're going to like to work for them or work with them. And I think military people in general, that's the unique shared experience. It goes back again to the shared suck. If you could sit there in a place that didn't have good food, you weren't in the most comfortable spot, just wasn't the ideal position. That's a skill. That's something that you can go in and try to let them know that you work in any environment. You can work with people. You're a contributor, you're a team asset. You have to sell your stuff in those things, and that's the hard part. One, we're humble people. We don't want to brag on ourselves. You got to break that down at least by yourself and try to articulate that in bullet points, because nobody's going to try to extrapolate out of it. Break it down into those, get those small skill sets of learning how to get a job, find a job, focus on what you want to do. It might be more long term. Use all the benefits in the military that allows you to do those transitions. There's so much stuff. I think all as veterans, I'm one of them, that when I first got out, I got away from it and then I got back into it as far as veterans benefits. Even now, sitting here as an old dinosaur, but get involved in the VA wherever you're at. Get involved with veteran groups when you get out, right? Get involved with your group, um, American Legion, all those. There's support staffs, right? And it's another shared experience. You're going to sit around like you did overseas or wherever you're at. You're going to start talking about normal shit. Tommy knows about this person who has a job. That's how you're going to get that job. You're not going to go through and bang all the damn website. You will, possibly, but you're going to be like me. You're just going to fucking hate your life. That's how you're going to find out about that job, right? So stay motivated. It's not going to be easy. You're the biggest cheerleader. Find out what skill sets you have, translate those into what a civilian will like to hear in their ear. And you're going to have to brag on yourself. That's what an interview is. And you're going to have to do that in an articulate way, like a very elegant way. And stay in contact with your buddies. They're going to go through the exact same thing. They might do it in California instead of Texas or wherever you might be. They might bump their head on something 3 times that you haven't even figured out yet. Get that mastered, then you're off to something else, and then you're going to start bumping your head on that. So stay in contact with your veteran buddies because they'll be able to help you. And just stay motivated. Start looking back on your military time because most people get out too, you're done. And you're glad to be done. You will look back on it. It will be more nostalgic. But you're transitioning. It's going to be hard. And listen, man, it might be, thank God, at this point right now, flag waving. Everybody loves to hug a veteran. Rightfully so. They need to. It's great. But there's going to be a lot of prejudice too. And a lot of that's underlying stuff. So, yeah, just look at it as just another objective to reach, a new mission to take care of. If you stay in contact with veteran groups, if you stay in contact with your buddies, and just don't take no for an answer. If it's something you really want to do, you're going to do it.